the talk that I wish I would have done on Wednesday or Thursday instead of waiting till Saturday was the final day's talk.
I am back with another Chat With Me episode with my good friend Neosha from Nick and Neosha in Mexico. Thank you for joining me today for National Family Caregivers Month
Of
and for
course.
sharing your story of being a caregiver to your son. And we had talked offline and you mentioned that there were some things you would do different that you think could help other parents. So I'm glad you're here to join me. But before we jump into that, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your two channels?
Well, I'm Neosha, and my first channel, which I have as my main channel, is Nick and Neosha in Mexico. So my husband and I had a calling from God just to come down to Mexico and basically be a missionary here and help others. But our first mission is to learn Spanish, which is not easy. So, so that's our first mission, and we are almost halfway through it. So,
I love the comment that you put about trying to figure out what gender a refrigerator is or whatever it was. But yeah, it's like inanimate objects have a gender in a
I
lot of languages.
know that was the we don't have that in English, and so that's like what a table is a male or a female. What? Yeah, very confusing, but we're learning. So, and that's our first channel, and we share about our life here in Mexico. And then my second channel is just Neosha Gearing, and it's a little bit of everything. I'm still working on tweaking it and stuff, but I try to share like my faith and things
Mhm.
that I'm doing, and I try to keep a positive vibe on that channel. So yeah.
And I'll link to both of your channels in the description.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you for joining me. So I know this is a tough topic to talk about, but I really appreciate you sharing your experience to try to help other parents who may be in the same boat. So I know your son had leukemia and you were his main caregiver. And when we were talking offline, you mentioned that there were some things, if you could go back, you would do differently. I guess before we jump into what we would do differently, can we talk a little bit about the cancer diagnosis and the road that got you down to rethinking
Yeah,
how you would do things?
for sure. So um, I would say back in January of 2020, uh, we were moving from one house to another. But my son, his name is Reese, he was ready to move out on his own.
Mhm.
And at that time, he was 20. And so as I was moving to a new home, he was getting ready to move in with a friend to just
Mhm.
be
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm ready for a new experience. Um, he was having some back issues. And I'm like, but I need help moving all these boxes and everything.
Mhm.
And he didn't know what was going on. He said he was destroying like a home with a sledgehammer, and
Mhm.
the next day his back started hurting. For the next 2 months, it those pains went from his back to like his arms. It was just sporadic, like, and then sometimes his legs would hurt and everything.
Mhm.
He was moved out, so I didn't see him a whole lot during that couple of months. And then in March of 2020, he called me up and he said, Mom, I'm really in a lot of pain. What he thought was growing pains was just not going away.
Mhm.
So I'm like, well, why don't you come with me? Let's go to the doctor and let's get that figured out.
Mhm.
So we went to the doctor, they did blood work, and then next thing we know, they sent us to a blood doctor. And we went to the blood doctor, and the blood doctor was did not have very good, what is it called?
Oh, bedside manner?
Yes, bedside manner.
We had a similar issue with my in-laws with one who
Yeah,
I don't know how he even became a doctor.
exactly. And so he told us basically, I'm asking, well, what's going on?
Mhm.
What could this be? When I already researched a little bit to try to figure out why are they sending us to a blood doctor, and I had
Mhm.
in the back of my mind what it could be. So I needed to know. He's like, well, we need to have him get a bone marrow they had to check his bone marrow to
Eh,
see what it is.
Right. I don't remember the name of it
Oh,
either. My sister's
I know.
husband had leukemia, and I can't remember the name of the
Oh,
test.
yeah. It's not the transplant, it's the other.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm like, well, and they wanted to do that in 2 days. And I'm like, well, I've never heard of this. What is this all about? And he was just like, well, the doctor sent you to me for a reason. So and I'm like, okay, well, okay, we'll schedule it. That's fine. And we left. I'm like, okay, we're getting a second opinion here because I
Hmm.
didn't like how that was done. So I had Reese move back in with me because he was just in so much pain. So I took care of him during that time and he didn't go to work. He worked construction. So,
Right.
um, we went to another doctor whom I knew and they did blood work. And then I want to say probably about 3 or 4 days later, they called us and said, we need you to come in for the results and make sure you bring your mom. And I'm like, okay, I know, I just know from all the research and everything. I'm like, I know this is leukemia. I hope it's not, but
Right.
I was already prepared and I've talked to Reese about it and everything. So we went in to the doctor, and sure enough, that's what he was diagnosed with, acute myeloid leukemia. And then I told her I had already researched oncologists in the nearest town and everything. And I said, can you set us up with this oncologist? I've read great reviews and I want to go to this person,
Hmm.
not knowing who any of these oncologists were. And
Right.
so she did, she set us up. We went up there and they did the bone marrow. Gosh, I wish I could remember what it's called. But they did that test. And 2 days later, they had us come back for the results, and the doctor said, yes, this is how they gave us percentage of how much leukemia was in there, the blasts in
Uh-huh.
his blood and everything. And they said, you're being admitted in the hospital today, and you're going to
Mm.
start chemotherapy, and you're going to be here for a month. And
No
it's like
time to adjust.
no time to adjust because he had the acute, which is very aggressive.
Hmm.
And Reese was like, I can't even go home to get any of my stuff. It's like, no, you need to be in the hospital now. Okay,
Hmm.
that was in at the end of April of 2020.
Hmm.
And you know what happened in 2020.
Right.
So basically, we were told that he was being admitted. I could not go into the room with him. I couldn't be with him because that's the cancer unit. And due to
Yeah.
the,
The compromised immune systems of all the patients, you can't
yeah.
come in.
Hmm. And
Hmm.
my son, never been sick in his life, never had to deal with doctors or anything in his life, had to go by himself. Oh my gosh.
I can't even imagine how scared he was.
Yeah. So there was a nurse in there that got it fixed to where I could actually come in during the day with him.
Okay.
So that was nice. Couldn't spend the night, but I could stay with him during the day. But I could not leave. If I left, I could not come back during the
Gotcha.
day. Mhm. So, so he was in there for the whole month and had the chemo, and then he got to come home at the end of the month of May of 2020. And then in June 2nd of 2020, we got the phone call that he was in remission. And it's like, hey, we were so
That's
glad.
quick.
It was quick. And okay, so I know I'm kind of going ahead a little bit, but two
Oh,
days
no, no,
later,
no, no, no. You're fine.
okay, 2 days later, okay, so my son was 20, but 2 days later, we get a phone call. He went out to go fishing with a friend because that's something that he loved to do. He didn't hold the worms or the fish or anything. The friend helped him, but he held the
Hmm.
fishing pole and stuff because of his immune system
Right.
was very low. But while he was out fishing, I got the phone call that his dad, okay, so I hadn't been with his dad since Reese was a baby. We divorced back then.
Hmm.
But his dad had just died. And it's like
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was like we found out that he was in remission. His dad, it was a Friday. His dad was going to come up to visit him since he got out of the hospital.
Hmm.
He called him up and he's like, "Hey, I can't, I'm not going to be able to come up today. I'll come up on Sunday."
Hmm.
And so they planned on Sunday for him to come. But later that evening,
Wow.
he passed away. So we had to
That's a lesson in don't put off tomorrow what you can do today.
exactly, exactly. So Reese was just, you know, Reese didn't know him that well, but he got to know him in the past year,
Hmm.
and he was, sad and everything. But he's like, he was supposed to come and see me, but he
Hmm.
didn't, so that was kind of devastating. So we had to go through a whole process of, because Reese was his oldest and he was not married, we had to go through the process of Reese planning his dad's funeral during that
Right.
time too. So, but since Reese got in remission, we found out that he was going to be able to have a bone marrow transplant. And so, oh, bone marrow biopsy, that's the test. And and so that therefore we had to move 3 hours away to the nearest hospital for a bone marrow transplant. And that was set for July 7th,
Hmm.
2020. So we had a whole month to plan accordingly, plan a funeral, do the funeral, and then pack and move to this town. It was Kansas City, really, is
Okay.
where it was.
Hmm.
So that's the beginning of all that.
Um, well, I know that's tough to relive, and thank you for sharing because I think it's important for people to see just how fast things can progress.
Hmm.
And you would think because he worked in construction that that's where the pain actually came from.
Hmm.
You're using
Exactly.
muscles. He probably was using muscles he hadn't used in a while.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why it took a couple of months. We didn't think anything of it.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah. It was just the craziest thing. I think back and I'm like, would it have made a difference if I would have taken him to the doctor right away whenever he was having those issues? I don't know. So,
And I think that's the problem with all of us. We have that if I coulda, woulda, shoulda moments.
mhm.
And I think I've said it before, we, as moms, as women, as daughters, as wives, we wear that superhero S on our chest and we think that we can solve the world. And
Yeah.
if I could have, and some things are really out of our control, but we have a really hard time of taking that step back and saying, it's not me. I could have done so much more.
I know. Yeah, exactly. And, there are so many times whenever I could go back and do that, but I choose not to
Hmm.
because I know it's not going to make things any better. It's not going to bring him back and it'll just make it worse on myself. And, why would I want to do that? So,
Yep, because you're doing so many wonderful things with your husband, and I think
yes.
you also have another son who's in the military. So
Well,
you got to be 100% present for all this new goodness that's going to come into your life.
exactly. Exactly. Mhm.
So looking back on that, what were those aha moments now that you're here in this moment that you can come look back and say, some things I wish I would have done different?
Some things I wish I would have done different. Okay, so throughout the journey, when we were living in Kansas City, we had to live in a motel room, and that was for 3 months. 100 days is what they say. And so in this motel room, not very big,
Hmm.
couldn't really do anything because of his immune system and all
Hmm.
that. We both kind of got little like because we're both outdoorsy people.
Hmm.
And so I want to say probably in about after 2 months of being there or whatever, Reese and I decided we're going to go hiking. I know
Hmm.
they say that you're not supposed to be out in the grassy area and stuff like that, but I hated to see my son cooped up all the time. I hated that. So I took him out. I think about that and I'm like, I'm glad I did that. But yeah, I think about it and I'm going, should I have done that? Would that have made a difference if I would have just kept him in the motel room away from
Yeah.
all that?
that goes back to the if I coulda, woulda, shouldas.
Mhm.
And so I had a lot of those if I coulda, woulda, shouldas with my dad, and following the doctor's orders 100%. No salt, no fat, no sugar, no taste.
Yes.
And, ducking plates. And my aunt telling me, because she's a nurse, and she says, I'm looking at his prognosis, and none of the stuff the doctors are telling you are going to keep him here longer. Let him have the damn burger.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the mindset that I had for my son at that time. And, he loved his Mountain Dew. And I'm like, that's a lot of sugar. Maybe he should have just not drank that back then. But you just don't know at all. And if it would have made a difference, yeah, I would have loved to have gone back and fixed that, but would it really have made the difference, with this diagnosis?
So I
So
hear this story and I look back and I said, you had a choice of staying cooped up in that motel room or making the beautiful memory that you made.
exactly. And I have pictures to prove it and everything. Yeah. So that's something I think back on. I'm like, should I have done that differently? Okay, so another thing that if I don't know. It's hard to say, but I remember they wanted because it was aggressive and they're like, we need to do a transplant now and everything. And
Hmm.
they have this whole record of finding someone they take all his blood and they put it in and they have people who want to donate and stuff, from all over the world. And so they try to match it up
Hmm.
and they want the best match is 100%.
Right.
Okay. So, but I was a 50%. And since they wanted to get it done so quickly and I was there already, they're like, let's do you. And I want to say I had a gut feeling that I shouldn't, but I didn't know. I don't know how all this
Mhm.
works, but I had that gut feeling. 96% took over, but 4% of his blood stayed.
Okay.
And that's why it didn't completely go. And his blood started taking back over. So
Got it.
yeah.
I think in the moment, you also had a gut feeling of, I want to give my son the best chance possible. And I've heard about the registry. Sometimes it can take a long time, and depending on where
Yeah.
he was,
Yeah.
I can definitely understand that you wish you could have
Mhm.
followed your gut in that moment.
Yeah.
And maybe it might have been different. That's that if I coulda, woulda, shoulda, is that we
Yeah.
don't want to
Mhm.
dwell on and be sad about, which
Mhm.
is hard not to be sad about.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good um, thing to share with people, to say, really look at the time that you may actually really have. And,
Mhm.
if you put it off a week, is that going to be a problem to try to find a
Yeah.
better match? And if not, let's go with the emergency match.
Right. Exactly. And that's another thing, we knew
Hmm.
I mean, we had no idea, which, and so that's something else I've thought about. Another thing that's um I'm going to go towards the end. He fought this for 2.5 years. So
Courageous warrior.
yeah, I'm just thankful that I got to spend 2.5 years with him. It was a lot. It was a toll on the both of us,
Hmm.
as a caregiver. It's a lot to see your loved one go
Hmm.
through this and everything. And sometimes I needed a break. It's just like I need a breather.
Hmm.
And I took it every once in a while. I will say with that, take some time. Try if somebody can fill in for you for a little while, take that time
Hmm.
because you need it. If you can't, you're not that strong. Nobody's that strong to
Exactly.
carry.
You gotta ask for help if people aren't volunteering, because sometimes people take your not asking as that you have it 100% under control. And
Exactly.
I've talked about that um, I had to learn to not just say I need help, but actually let people help me. And
Yes.
there's a difference. You ask for help and like, okay, yeah, you can just go to the store and buy this thing, but no, let them actually really help. Come in and
Mhm.
make the meal too, or something like that.
Yeah,
Let them really help you to get through this, because a lot of people see us as, you always have it under control. You have
right.
it always. And she's not asking, she doesn't need anything. And we're like
Yeah.
screaming with our eyes, help me, but people can't
Mhm.
read our eyes. People
Yeah.
can't read our...
They're not there with us in the middle of the night and in the early mornings when we are
Hmm.
weeping and crying because we need to release that stress,
Hmm.
They're
Yep.
not with us at that time. They don't see that. And so I would definitely mention to people who know somebody that's going through it, offer the help no matter
Yep.
what. D- Don't even offer it. Just say, "Hey, I'm going to do this."
Exactly. Because you don't give them a chance to say, no, I got this. Because
Exactly.
for some reason, I don't know what it is. We just tend to say, I got it. It's okay. It's okay. And deep inside, we're like falling apart.
Yes, exactly. And that's it. That's the thing. So I'm going to say towards the end, he was in the hospital for 12 days before he passed. He'd been in the hospital in and out, in and out.
Hmm.
But that last time that he was in the hospital, something felt different about it.
Hmm.
And I kept on asking the doctor, um, is he going to make it out? Is he going to make it through this? And he kept reassuring me. I knew, I had that gut feeling that he was not going to. But the doctor kept saying, okay, but when before we've been told before he's not going to make it out of the hospital, but he did, you know.
Right.
But we're like, no, he's going to make it out of the hospital. Why are you telling us that he's not going to get out of the hospital from this? And he did make it out. This time it was just something different. It was like, you know, I don't know. I knew. But what I would say, if I could go back to that time, what I wish I would have done is when I realized, when I had that gut feeling, um, I kept putting this little talk off during that week. And I was like, okay, I'm going to wait till Saturday because I was going to talk to him and I'll tell you what it is here in a second.
Hmm.
But I was going to talk to him. It was Wednesday or Thursday. I was going to talk to him, but I'm like, no, I'm going to wait till Saturday when my husband can be with me because
Hmm.
my husband is really good at remembering things. Because in that 2.5 years, my memory went downhill. So
Uh-huh.
it was hard for me to remember things. So I might wanted my husband to be there. So Saturday morning, my husband and I got up to get ready to go. And we're getting dressed, and I get the phone call that my son's not doing it, that we need to get there.
Hmm.
And okay, the hospital was an hour away from our home. And so I'm like, okay, we will get on the road right now. And as we were on the road, we get the phone call that he passed. So we weren't even there. So the talk that I wish I would have done on Wednesday or Thursday instead of waiting till Saturday was the final days talk, basically,
Hmm.
the end of life talk. Um, I wish I could have done that with him and be like, what are your wishes? What do you want me to do with your stuff? What kind of do you want to be buried or cremated? Which I already
Right.
knew what he wanted with that. But what what do you want me to do for your funeral?
Hmm.
Just but it was
A
so
very,
hard for me
a
to,
very tough conversation
yeah,
for a parent to have with a child. It's not something that you
yes.
ever think that you would need to do. You would think that you'd be telling them about you instead of
Mhm,
asking about them.
exactly. So that I wish that's the one thing I wish I could go back and change is to have that tough talk.
Hmm.
And probably have it earlier on before. But every time I thought about it, I'm like, no, he's not going to die. This is my child. But
Yes.
I would say anytime somebody is diagnosed with cancer, no matter what, have that conversation. Or
Hmm.
even when you're well still. I mean,
Hmm.
without even being sick. Have
Yeah.
those conversations.
That's one of the things that's made me start my blog and this channel
Mm.
is, over the decades of family members who, like my aunt passed away suddenly and had no will, no
Right.
nothing, would never talk about anything with us. So, not only we did not know did she want to be buried or if she wanted to be cremated or where, we
Exactly.
had no idea, what we're going to do with her stuff because there's no will. And so now I got to go to probate. My grandfather was technically her next of kin.
Mhm.
But then you have this unscrupulous person who came into our lives and, forged a will and said she gave everything to him. And we had to fight that in court for months,
Oh
even
gosh.
though it was signed, dated, and notarized 4 days after she passed. So she died on one day. 8 days later, this thing was dated. It wasn't dated the date of her death. It was dated that day. And her
Wow.
name was spelled wrong. We still had to fight it in court. And that is why, at 30, we created a trust. We
Mm-hmm.
had nothing. we had
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we have nothing but debt, but we created a trust because of that. And then with my husband's uncle, his dad's brother, he
Mm-hmm.
had a will, but he didn't have anything else. So he went into the bank confused. Someone got conservatorship over him and kicked us out of their lives. Next thing we know, we get the call that he's passed and we can go to his funeral and that's it.
Wow.
And so that's why it's important to have these, like you said, these conversations
Yes.
early and often,
Mm-hmm.
so people
Yeah.
understand what it is because we never know.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, with Reese, it was an illness, but
Yes.
we never know if we leave the house to go to the grocery
Yeah.
store if we're going to come back.
Exactly. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, okay, my other son, he's 22. He is the same age that Reese was when Reese passed. Um, and maybe I need to have that conversation with him, you know? It's just weird to talk to your child about it.
Yeah,
So,
I know that when because I have two brothers who went into the service, and my I actually had that conversation with my mom and go, so they're going into the service.
mm,
What happens? And my
mm,
mom actually said, well, if something happens to them, the service will bury them. I don't have to think about it.
mm,
And I'm like, but wouldn't you want to know? And
mhm,
she's like, no, I never want to talk about having to bury my child.
mm. Yeah, it's not a good thing
Hmm.
to have to think about, really. Not at all. But
Hmm.
I I definitely, I mean, if something were to happen to my other son, I mean, I
Hmm.
want to be all in for everything, He's my child,
Hmm.
you know?
And we think we're young, we're invincible, or they're young and they're invincible.
Yes.
And we never think that any of this bad stuff happens. And so I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that side because I
Mhm,
don't think people would have thought your things you regret and wish you could go back and do different were these types of things. I
mhm,
think everybody would think it would be I beat up the doctors more or something like that. And
right.
I think hearing this from a mom
Mhm,
of someone who passed in his 20s, I'm hoping it'll get people to realize these are not morbid conversations to have because at the end of the day, you're going to have that peace that
mhm.
you did it early.
Yes, exactly. That's definitely it.
Because
So,
it's bad enough to lose them, but at least you can lose them and make sure their final wishes were granted because that will
yeah,
give you some closure.
yeah, exactly. Because after Reese passed, I'm like, I don't even know. I don't know what to do with all his stuff and everything. I mean,
Hmm.
throughout the years, it's been 2.5 years now since he's passed. And so throughout the years, I gradually got rid of some of his stuff instead of hanging on to it. But I
Yeah.
wish I would have known who he wanted this to go to, this to go to. Then I could have easily gone, okay, here, have it,
Because
instead of,
holding on to it, you still have a little piece of him. And and
exactly.
and and also too, there's nothing wrong with that. I know I talk about
Mhm.
Swedish death cleaning, but there's just something about that emotional connection. You get rid of it when you're ready to get rid of it. There's
Exactly.
no there's no huge giant rush that you got to throw all the memories away. Like with my
Yeah.
dad, I there was this cardigan sweater, it's the ugliest green you could have ever seen, but I held on to that for dear life because it
Mhm.
smelled like him. It reminded me of him. It was
Yeah.
something that I could not let go of.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. So the first thing that I did whenever I went home that day that he passed, we went home and the first thing I did is go into his bedroom and took all the medical supply stuff. every bit
Yes.
of it and I threw it in the trash. I did not want that to have as a reminder
Right.
of his last years of life at all. That was easy to get rid of.
Yeah,
So,
we did a similar thing when Phil passed. We like called, can you come and get this hospital bed out of here? We don't want Mill to be seeing this all the time. We
yeah,
took out all the walkers and the potty chairs. We took out all of that kind of
yeah.
stuff. We have not touched his clothes because every now and then she opens up the closet,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of those closets that I still need to organize. But I don't have the heart to take that away from her because that's actually etched in her memory.
All
That
right.
closet, his stuff is still
Mhm.
etched in her memory. Like
Yeah,
taking out a coffee pot she bought 3 years ago, she ain't gonna remember that. But she's gonna
right.
remember that closet that they've shared since they bought that house in the 60s and that his stuff isn't there.
Oh, wow. Yeah, definitely. I right away took his shirts, his favorite t-shirts,
Mm-hmm.
and had it made into a quilt. So
Oh.
that way, because otherwise, what was I going to do with t-shirts? I couldn't wear them. He was a little smaller than I am. So,
And this way it'll last you a lot longer and have that great memory. And that's a great,
like,
idea to think about. I can't imagine, all the things that you've gone through. I really appreciate you being so open and honest and sharing.
oh
And
yeah.
I know because I do believe in signs. I posted my one of my last videos.
Mhm.
All those pictures were pictures taken of places that I love. And
Mhm.
one of them is one where right after Phil passed away, it was actually the night of their what would have been their 61st wedding anniversary. We took Mill out to dinner and we were at a restaurant
Mhm.
and we were overlooking the water
Yeah.
and a hummingbird landed on
Wow.
a bird of paradise outside the window
Yeah.
and stayed the entire time. And
That's amazing.
I felt that that was a sign
Yes.
um, that he's here telling us that he's fine and he
Yeah.
wants us to live and he wants us to make sure we're
Mhm.
taking care of Bill, which we
Yeah.
promised that we would. And so I believe that all those
Mhm.
things are signs for you too.
I
That
agree.
you're now out in nature, which is what Reese really
Mhm.
loved,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
actually able to partake of it every single day. And I
Yeah.
do believe he was also very high in his faith as well too, right?
So he was, but not as high, but he was.
Hmm.
And so towards the end, yes, it got more. So
And so you're carrying that forward too.
mhm. Yes.
I think all of these are signs that our loved ones are still with us and walking with us.
Hmm.
And I hope that he's proud that you're sharing this story with others.
Yes, yes, definitely. I after he passed, I 3 days later, I think, um, it was I went to look for a meeting where for grieving parents because I'm
Hmm.
like, I can't be the only one because it feels like such a lonely journey.
Hmm.
And so you know what, I ended up finding a meeting called Grief Share, and I went to it, but there were two other ladies there, but they lost their husbands.
Hmm.
So it was nice because we still had, you know,
Hmm.
both their husbands died from cancer. So it was still kind of a similar situation.
Hmm.
But then we started that ministry in our church, and it helped me to help others, you know,
Hmm.
going through a loss. So, and that's one of the reasons why I like to share my story is because I
Hmm.
like to help others, and it helps. It definitely it helps heal my heart to know
Hmm.
that others are being helped through this. So,
Yeah, I was a little worried because like at work I could tell people these stories because it's like a
mhm,
handful of people,
mhm,
bringing it to, the World Wide Web. I was a
right.
little bit scared about, jumping on privacy because still I got family members still here, still,
Yeah, yeah.
some of these wounds are still fresh.
Hmm.
And even like I was talking about with you a little bit earlier before we started this call is my dad passed in 1994 and I never know when it's going to hit me that he's not here.
Yeah, yeah.
I know he's not here.
Hmm.
But you smell something that smelled like him. Or
Yeah.
I'll never forget the first time that my husband, as my boyfriend, made me breakfast,
Mm.
and he made the world's runniest eggs, and I'm like crying, going, "Oh my God, you make them just like my dad."
Oh, that's sweet. Yes.
And you're like
Yeah.
sitting here, he's like, "I was just trying to be nice. I was trying to make you, breakfast. I don't know how to handle all these tears."
I know. Exactly. That's one thing my husband went through. We had just got married in March 2022, and 4 months later, in July 2022, my son passed. So it was just super quick. And my husband's like, I don't know how to take care of you. I don't know what to do. And basically, what he did was just perfect. He helped me. That's it. I mean,
Hmm.
that's you just be there with me. I told him, I was like, after Reese passed, either the day or the next day, I said, don't leave me alone anytime soon because I can't do this by myself. And he stuck
Hmm.
it out. He was amazing for it all. So yeah.
Yeah, and I know that you shared this with your interview with Jazz, and I think that's also something that I want to bring up here is, your husband and you are together because of your son,
Yes.
and I just, to me, I think that is so heartwarming that
Mm.
he felt comfortable enough to leave you,
Yeah,
knowing that he brought you two together.
that's true. Very true. Yeah. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. So, but yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I when you brought up the signs, so it is amazing to see the little signs because it just brings a little bit of warmth to your heart,
Hmm.
knowing that, you know, they are, watching you or whatever.
Hmm.
And so um I want to say, I want to tell you this little sign that I ended up getting. Sometimes we get dreams.
Hmm.
And within the first week or two, oh, that was just the hardest time. I felt like there was a huge hole in my chest. It
Hmm.
was just like there was no way to fill it because it was just, oh, it was horrible. But I would cry and cry and I'd be like, God, I just want to hear from Reese. I want to see him. I'm like,
Hmm.
I just I miss my son. And in my dream one night, within that first 2 weeks, he came into my dream. And I mean, it was probably the second or third time that he came into my dream, but this time was so different. We were doing something and I looked up, I'm like, Reese, you're here, and he's, looking at me and I said, Reese, I love you. And he said, I love you too, Mom. And I'm like, spoke. The other two dreams, he did not speak. And I'm like, oh my gosh. He said, I love you. And I said, I miss you. And he's like, I know. And I'm like, can I give you a hug? And he said, yes. And so I go in for a hug to hug him. And then he starts dissipating. And I'm like, no, I can't hug you because you're going to go away. And then I woke up and I'm just
Oh.
like, I just knew it was him. And it was like God's way of saying, he's okay.
Hmm.
He's healed. And, that dream, it healed me. It was
Hmm.
just like, okay, now I don't cry anymore, wanting to hear from him, to see him, because I worried. I'm like, I don't know if he's okay. Where is he? Type of thing.
Hmm.
So it was a good sign. So,
I have a funny sign.
uh-huh.
When my mom passed away, I have a lot of her grandchildren really, really distraught. They're gonna miss Granny. My
Mhm.
sister's cell phone was acting crazy. I gave
Yeah.
her my mom's cell phones because she works graveyard. You need to just use this phone.
Mhm.
She called somebody, scared the crap out of them because Granny was calling them
Oh, that's
because it was
funny.
saying in their phone as Granny.
That's hilarious.
My
Yes.
husband tells me all the time, "Your sick sense of humor. You're always trying to find humor in the saddest places."
It's okay. It's okay to find the positive and, kind of bring up the I don't
And my
know.
sister goes, I didn't even think that, the numbers, pre-programmed when I called the person.
That's true. So yeah, no, it doesn't always have to be sad.
Hmm.
So not always. So yeah,
Yeah.
but
Well, I thank you. If you have any last words of encouragement or advice to parents caring for their children.
Mhm. So basically, just be there with them, spend as much time with them, and reassure them, and just look for those positives. And I don't know, it's just it. Death doesn't have to be the end, but with Reese, it was his time to go.
Mhm,
And after he passed, I will say that I've never felt God's presence as strongly as I did after he passed. And
mhm,
basically from there, I try to share his story, and
mhm,
I try to share my story and everything. And I know that's what I can do to help others, and
mhm.
uh, just
Well, I
so
honestly feel that everything that you said today is going to help a lot of people because, we talk about caregiving so much from I'm taking care of my parents or my grandparents. And, there are so many stories of parents taking care of their children who have illnesses. But
mhm,
even just being a parent, you are a caregiver.
yes.
And, we never know what's going to happen. They could have an illness. They could just be normal kids and just pass on us. And we want to make sure that people understand you're
Mhm.
not alone. And
Yeah,
there are resources out there. And I'll actually link to
yeah,
the National Cancer Society and Leukemia Society below as well that have a lot of resources for caregivers with children going through cancer.
yeah. I will say that with the leukemia, him dealing with that, I linked into the Leukemia and Lymphoma
Hmm.
Association.
Yes.
So good. They helped us out a lot. So
Yes. So thank you. Like I said, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for
okay.
being so open and honest. And if I could, I'd hug you. So I'll just give you a virtual hug here. I really appreciate you. And I just love everything about our tribe here that we've, built
Me
here
too.
on YouTube. It's not only, I said loving and caring towards each other, but the love and care and the value that we want to share with our viewers. I
Yes.
think that makes a huge difference in uh, the imprint that we're going to make on this world.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. Love everybody in our tribe.
Again, everybody, I will link all the channels for Nick and Neosha down below. Please check them out.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I hope you found my chat with my friend Neosha very helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you'll be alerted for any future chats I have with my YouTube family. Now, I'm going to send you over here to Nick and Neosha's channel where they talk about how they sold everything and moved to Mexico. If you made it this far with me, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.